Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen is set to stay in power if her left-wing bloc gets the expected Faroe Islands and Greenland votes.
Outgoing Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro breaks his silence since losing the election on Sunday, but does not concede defeat.
Denmark's Social Democrat Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen is set to stay in power after the country's left-wing bloc won a one-seat majority in Tuesday's general election. The very last votes counted in the knife-edge poll that gives Frederiksen's side 87 seats in mainland Denmark, but 3 more are expected from the autonomous overseas territories of Faroe Islands and Greenland. Dear Denmark, I am so happy and proud. The Social Democrats we have had the best election in more than 20 years. Before confirmation that Frederiksen's so-called Red Bloc or left-leaning parties had achieved the 90 seats needed for a majority in their 179-seat parliament, former Prime Minister Lars Rasmussen appeared set to become the kingmaker. His newly formed centrist party won 16 seats. Frederiksen's rival right-wing Blue Bloc ended up with 72 seats. Frederiksen says she will try to form a new government with broad support across the political divide.
Jair Bolsonaro has broken the silence he's maintained since losing Brazil's presidential elections on Sunday, but noticeably he did not expressly concede his defeat. In a brief press conference, the outgoing president thanked the 58 million Brazilians who voted for him and did not once mention the name of the winner, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. He then spoke about protests going on in the country. The current popular movements are the result of indignation and the feeling of injustice of how the electoral process was carried out. Peaceful demonstrations will always be welcomed, but our methods cannot be like those of the left, which have always harmed the population. Bolsonaro's statement comes after 2 days of hundreds of blockades of highways and roads carried out by truck drivers who support the ousted far-right president. They're questioning the 2-point victory of left-wing rival and former President Lula, as he's known. Streets have been blocked in Sao Paulo and elsewhere, and the apparent inaction of the police, who many suspect of sympathising with Bolsonaro, has put the judiciary in the spotlight. On Tuesday, the Supreme Court ordered the Federal Highway Police to immediately clear the protests and warned of serious consequences if that doesn't happen. The police hit back, saying over 200 protests have been broken up. But the tensions haven't stopped Lula's supporters celebrating. World leaders were also quick to congratulate him, including the Argentinian President Alberto Fernandez. Now, the victor and his supporters just want to see a peaceful handover of power.
There is still no movement of cargo ships carrying Ukrainian grains on Wednesday. It leaves the future of the UN-brokered deal, which ensures safe wartime passage of critical food supplies, in doubt. On Tuesday, 3 ships carrying corn, wheat and sunflower meal did travel through the humanitarian sea corridor, despite the Russian withdrawal from the agreement. Russia's leader Vladimir Putin has told his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan in a phone call that Moscow will only consider resuming the deal if he secures real guarantees from Kyiv. Moscow suspended its participation due to Saturday's drone attack on Russia's fleet in Crimea, one that Putin blames on Ukraine. Kyiv has not claimed responsibility and has denied using the safe shipping corridor for military purposes. This is literally a matter of life for tens of millions of people. In his nightly address, Ukraine's President Zelensky said the grain corridor needs reliable protection and that Russia should receive a tough international response for disrupting food exports. Earlier, Zelensky had welcomed the European Commissioner for Energy in Kyiv.
But I'm sure you have Water and power has been restored in the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, 24 hours after Russia launched another barrage of missile strikes here. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko warned, though, that power cuts would be still necessary given the significant impact of Russia's recent attacks on crucial infrastructure. The Institute for the Study of War said it was likely done in an attempt to degrade Ukraine's will to fight as temperatures drop across the country. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia launched 55 cruise missiles, 45 of which were shot down by air defense. Meanwhile, the situation in the south of Ukraine and the battle for Kherson intensifies. The Institute for the Study of War says Russian forces are likely continuing to move troops and military assets across the Dnipro River in anticipation of Ukrainian advances towards Kherson city, even as they save conditions to fight for positions around Kherson city. Now, Russian-backed Kherson occupation deputy Kirill Stremousov stated Russian forces began engineering positions in Belozerivka and Chornobayivka. Now, the fact that Russian collaborators are preparing to defend Chornobayivka is particularly noteworthy, as this is the last settlement along the M14 north of Kherson. The current front line lies less than 20 kilometers northwest of Chornobayivka, and active efforts to bolster defense here indicate concerns for an imminent Ukrainian advance. The think tank says the simultaneous evacuation of military assets from the West Bank and preparations for the defense of critical area around Kherson city indicate serious anxiety of Russian control of the West Bank, whilst Russian officials are continuing to create poor conditions in occupied parts of Kherson region, likely to drive local inhabitants to evacuate from here.
A rare happy ending opposed to the tragedy that normally plagues the shores of the Mediterranean. In the middle of the night, Greek Coast Guards managed to rescue 9 migrants clinging to rocks under a cliff near the island of Evia. Their boat sunk. Dozens of people were on board. A search for survivors is underway. Europe's unusually warm weather has triggered a surge of migrants risking dangerous Mediterranean routes. In the past week, more than 6,000 have reached Italy's coast. On Tuesday, at least 175 arrived at the island of Lampedusa in 4 different boats. Local authorities say they are overwhelmed. Boats chartered by humanitarian groups setting out to rescue drifting migrants also say they're struggling. The Ocean Viking has yet to find a safe harbour for the 234 people it rescued late last month. SOS Mediterranean warns that holding survivors on board the boats hostage to political debate will be a dramatic failure of European members and states. In total, some 1,000 migrants are waiting on humanitarian boats to be transferred to land. Some countries, such as Italy, have warned that they will not let those rescued by foreign NGO boats disembark.
And protect them for the months that they're going to spend up on the winter.
A few sprinkles of holy water and a short prayer to protect the animals. That's how a lesser-known autumn custom in southwestern Ireland begins. Every year, at the end of October, the cattle and some enthusiastic onlookers head to the rugged landscape of Burren. For 5 months, the animals will wander and graze over the stony hills. It's an ancient farming practice that has turned into an annual celebration.
Simply, when the cattle go up here today onto the winters, they're going to spend the whole winter harvesting dead grasses and vegetation from the burn pastures. Then in spring, when the cattle come back down, the sunlight can penetrate the ground floor and all these beautiful gentians and orchids can pop out unhindered and flower and seed for the rest of the summer. It's like this is a botanical metropolis. Lots of flowers from different parts of the world, Arctic, Alpine, Mediterranean, packed into this little landscape.
The practice is affectionately called winterage, and many here say it's the key to Burren's famous biodiversity.
They're warm coming from the limestone, and there's little valleys and little pathways, and it's with plenty of shelter, and it's actually, even in the coldest days you think the cattle would be cold, but heat comes off the limestone, so they're not cold.
While many farmers might fret about sufficient food for their cattle on seemingly barren mountains, these farmers say it's never been a problem. The cattle drive marks the changing of seasons, the turning of the year.